Well, defence experts are predicting that Russia will invade the Ukraine as early as next week. That seems to be the feeling amongst the better commentators. But it won't be a full-scale invasion, they're now saying. It's in a strange development. While the US and the UK send in military resources to assist the Ukraine army, Germany, would you believe, has coughed up the insulting total of 5,000 helmets. Thank you very much. Meanwhile, Australia is considering supplying natural gas to Europe following fears that Russia could cut off its main pipeline of gas through the Ukraine, which then leads to other parts of Europe. To weigh up the probabilities, we're joined now by Professor Joe Siracusa, political analyst at Curtin University. Professor, thank you for your time. How close are we to seeing Russian troops inside the Ukraine? How will this play out?
Good evening, Chris. Well, actually, Russians are very close to attacking. They say a week or 2 weeks. They're waiting for some reinforcements. What I see in Europe, we have maybe 150 to 170,000 Russians on the borders of Belarus and Russia facing Ukraine. So there's a lot more people there than we imagine. Now, look, some wars are wars of necessity, and some wars are wars of choice. This is a war that is tragic. You know, we forced Putin into this. Now, Putin's not a good guy, but he ain't Hitler and a whole lot of other things. This is his strategic neighborhood. What he's worried about is he's not worried about NATO or Ukraine. He's worried about NATO in Ukraine. And Ukraine, the Ukraine border is 449 kilometers to Moscow. So you put in a short-range nuclear missile, and Putin has gone in his sleep. He's worried about threat to his regime. I mean, for him, this is a big deal. And I know you have a lot of viewers tonight who remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. I was a young man at the time, and John Kennedy was prepared to turn the world to dust because Nikita Khrushchev installed intermediate range ballistic missiles in Cuba, 90 miles from Florida. You know, we have to recognize that this is of core interest to Putin, and he's going to fight for it. And you don't want to back a guy into a corner who has, 6,000 strategic nuclear warheads, thousands of tactical nuclear warheads, and former superpowers, they don't bluff. And what I find very difficult here is NATO keeps pushing for more active involvement, and NATO's not going to fight anybody without the United States, and the United States is not going to fight anybody. But what I find very distracting about all this is that while President Biden is getting bogged down in Europe, which is of core interest to the United States, but not as important as the Pacific. That once again, this pivot to the Pacific has been delayed. First, there was going to be in 2014 with Obama. He got delayed because of the wars in the Middle East, plus the Ukraine business. And once again, we have been delayed. So a lot of important things are not happening. And the Chinese, of course, are watching this very closely. Now, how do I know he's going to attack? Well, he attacked Georgia during one of the Olympic Games, and then he attacked Ukraine during another Olympic Games. So, this guy's got a track record of attacking during Olympic Games. It seems to be his lucky thing. But look, we forced him in this corner, and I just love to see President Biden pick up the horn tonight and say, look, there ain't going to be any NATO in Ukraine on my watch, and I'm not going to send any advanced strategic weapon systems to that border. I want him to reassure Putin, and Putin will back off. Chris, Putin doesn't want war. Who wants war? What he wants is the fruits of war. He just wants the U.S. to get off his back here. And of course, NATO double-crossed him twice by moving their borders closer and closer to Russia. So there's a lot of legitimacy here. But this idea that the United States is going to go to the defense of the freedom-loving Ukrainians, well, I'll tell you what, we don't hear much about Taiwan being able to pick its military alliance. We all seem to know what the rules are there, but with Ukraine, we've turned them into freedom fighters. And keep in mind this, too. A lot of Americans who are old enough to remember this. In 1960s, when President Johnson and before him, President Kennedy, said the war in Vietnam was the most important strategic thing that the United States can get involved in. Not one NATO ally followed the United States into Vietnam. That's why Australia is remembered, and Thailand's remembered, and South Korea, and those kinds of nations.
Sure.
So the United States has been...
Can I ask you this? So therefore, these threats from Joe Biden about harsh economic sanctions. You will feel the pain. This means nothing to Russia, right?
No, not if you're going to change the strategic balance in their own neighborhood. No, they'll go to the wall on this one. These threats mean nothing to Putin, particularly if you're threatening his existence. Biden's, of course, talking about supporting democracy in Ukraine, which is really shorthand for we're coming for you, as a matter of fact. It's about regime change. Yeah. So, no, these sanctions aren't going to do anything. You know, Chris, I don't like sanctions. People think it's kind of the soft way to fight a war. But, you know, sanctions poisons everything. When the sanctions or tariffs, that kind of thing, when the Chinese came after Australia, it poisoned everything. And when Trump went after the Chinese with the trade sanctions, it poisoned everything. And I regard sanctions like this, they're just an act of war. So I think Biden's rolling the dice on this one. And look, his numbers are down in the gutter. You know, about 39% of the American people believe in him anymore. And he doesn't have any kind of leg to stand on. And so I think he's sort of pitching to the domestic audience. I've always found that when it comes to lying to people, governments to governments really don't lie very often. But governments lie to their own people a lot about what's at stake here. And to give the American people the impression that we're on the brink of war over Ukraine is false. On the other hand, Republicans and Democrats can both think this is a great idea. But America's not going to war.
All right. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for that analysis.
Well, thank you, sir. Anytime.
No problem. Professor Joe Siracusa. I guess we wait until the Beijing Games start, and so will another set of games on the Ukraine border.